Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Jack Edwards and first and foremost I think the most important thing to say is Happy freaking New Year! And I'm just so excited about it being a new year, a new decade. Like I just feel really pumped for what this year is going to bring. And so I am going to be starting the year with a brand new video every single weekday in January, or should I say Jacuary. Definitely something that sounded better in my head, but it's left my mouth now, so we're gonna go with it.
On tonight's program, ladies and gentlemen, we have something that's gonna make you sick.
Last year, at the beginning of the year, I set myself the challenge to read 100 books in 2019. And I just did it. Like, I literally read 100 on the dot. As some kind of context, I guess, I do an English lit degree, so that sort of helped in terms of reading such a variety of literature and being actively encouraged to always be reading. But I do absolutely love reading, and I think the reason that I took this degree was because I wanted to be exposed to such a broad variety of books and literature, and so that's kind of what I've ended up reading and absorbing, which is great. And so with today's video, basically what I'm going to do is go over all 100 books that I read in 2019. I'm going to pop the ratings up here. So as I went through the year, I rated them on Goodreads. I keep track of every book that I read on Goodreads, and also I'll kind of give a few little comments maybe, but obviously not for all of them because there's 100 to get through. So I don't want you to be sitting here until like 2021, but without further ado, these are the 100 books that I read in 2019. So I started the year off with To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, which I just think is one of the most incredible books I've ever read, and made me just fall in love with modernism and make me want to research modernism even further. So I cannot recommend that book enough. I love it. Then I read the whole of The Selected Poems by Sylvia Plath, We Should All Be Feminists by Adichie, The Complete Poems of Emily Dickinson, if you want to read some poetry about like mortality and death and that kind of thing, which sounds really exciting, I'm sure. Emily Dickinson is a great place to start. Then I read Shakespeare's Sonnets by Paul Edmondson, which is basically literary criticism, and I've only included critical books if I have, like academic books, if I read them cover to cover. And so that's one of those that I read cover to cover. And then on a similar note, Neil Gaiman and Philosophy, God's Gone Wild by Tracy L. Beeler, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Rennie Edo Lodge, Venus and Adonis by William Shakespeare, The Good Soldier by Ford Madox Ford. Absolutely loved this book, could not put it down and just wanted to do so much research afterwards. Yeah, that was really great. Shakespeare's King Lear, you might be able to tell that I did a module in Shakespeare. North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell was another one that I just loved researching and reading more about. Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy, Tolkien's The Fellowship of the Ring, which is the first installment of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Now, controversial opinion alert, I loved The Hobbit, but I just did not love the first installment of the Lord of the Rings. I'm sorry, but yeah, it just wasn't really my thing. A Midsummer Night's Dream by Shakespeare, This Is Going to Hurt, Secret Diaries of a Junior Doctor by Adam Kay. Now there is a reason this book sold over 1 million copies and has just been everywhere that you go because it is incredibly written. It's so funny and heartbreaking and beautiful, and just, you have to read it. Please read this book. Vile Bodies by Evelyn Waugh, another one of my favourite books that I read this year. Joseph Conrad, The Secret Agent. Heather Morris's The Tattoo of Auschwitz. Stephen Fry's Mythos. Now this is Greek mythology retold by Stephen Fry in the most wonderful, accessible way. It's so great. If you have any interest in mythology, you will love this book. Shakespeare's Measure for Measure. Shakespeare's As You Like It. Shakespeare's The Comedy of Errors. As you can see, I was on a bit of a Shakespeare binge, or Shakespeare catch-up at this point. American Gods by Neil Gaiman. The Cambridge Companion to the Lighthouse. The Decay of Lying and Other Essays by Oscar Wilde. This is literary criticism, but written in the form of like a play, and it's so great. Charlotte Bronte, Villette. Christopher Isherwood, A Single Man. This is where I decided what I was going to study for my dissertation, and yeah, this book is so great. Virginia Woolf, A Room of One's Own. Sandra M. Gilbert's The Mad Woman in the Attic. The Collected Poems of Langston Hughes. Oh my god, I just fell in love with the poetry of Langston Hughes and the Harlem Renaissance. Big fan of that. The Red Wheelbarrow and Other Poems by William Carlos Williams, followed by The Cambridge Companion to William Carlos Williams. Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. Mary Poppins by P.L. Travers. Gilead by Marilyn Robinson. Absolutely hated this book. Followed by a book that I really enjoyed, The Beautiful and Damned by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Machiavelli's The Prince. I don't know why I put myself through this, but I did. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I read this years and years ago, but I wanted to reread it. The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I can't can't believe I'd never read this book, but I really enjoyed reading it. Rabbits Run by John Updike. The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. This is a beautiful, incredible book. Wieland or Wieland, I hated this. This was honestly one of the worst things I've ever read. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Taking Up Space, The Black Girl's Manifesto for Change by Chelsea and Ori. It is the most incredible book. It honestly changed the way that I see university, the education system. This is such vital reading, I can't recommend this enough. Brighton Rock by Graham Greene quickly became one of my favourite books I've ever read. At Bertram's Hotel by Agatha Christie, this is one of the Miss Marple books. The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. I mean, you guys all know how I feel about this book. It did not deserve the Man Booker Prize. I'm still fuming about that, but it was fine to read. Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. Americana, again by Adichie. This is an exquisite, wonderful book. Loved it. Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. Mr. Norris Changes Trains by Christopher Isherwood. The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. An Introduction by Kamala Das. Christopher Isherwood's Goodbye to Berlin. Jhumpa Lahiri's Interpreter of Maladies. Edith Wharton's The House of Mirth. The Collected Poems of Dylan Thomas. The White Tiger by Aravind Adiga, a fantastic book. Brokeback Mountain by Annie Proulx. This Sporting Life by David Story. The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Spark. I loved studying this book so much. 3 Hours After Marriage by Alexander Pope. All the Poems, Stevie Smith. This is sensational. It's called Awkward Poetry. She wrote the poem Not Waving But Drowning, which is just a beautiful poem, and she also drew sort of like illustrations that go alongside the poems, and whenever they were published she absolutely demanded that the illustrations that she'd drawn, which are just wacky and wonderful, were published alongside the poetry. And yeah, just so great to read and look at. Really cool poetry. Saturday Night and Sunday Morning by Alan Sillitoe. Desiree's Baby by Katie Choppim. The Wives' Excuse or Cuckolds Make Themselves by Sal Southern? The Provoked Wife, a comedy by John Vanbrugh. Moby Dick by Herman Melville. This was a task. This was a whale of a task, and at times it was a whale of a time, at other times it was quite dull, but it was a book that I've always wanted to read, and so I'm glad I did it. Alexander Pope's Eloisa to Abelard. The Hungry Tide by Amitav Ghosh. Oh my gosh, this is great. Brig Flats by Basil Bunting. A Meeting by the River by Christopher Isherwood. Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton. Christopher and His Kind, again by Christopher Isherwood. You can tell I'm writing my dissertation on Christopher Isherwood. The Mystery of the Addleton Curse. The Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith. Could not put this down. Notes on Camp by Susan Sontag. If you're a fan of the Met Gala, you will know that this was the theme of 2019's Met Gala, and Notes on Camp is a fantastic critical analysis of Camp. Orinoco by Afra Ben. Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. Greyhound for Breakfast by James Kelman, another one I just did not enjoy at all. Foucault's The History of Sexuality. Funny Boy. Funny Boy is one of the most sensational books I've ever read. I really enjoyed it. The way that personal identity politics and national politics are discussed in the same book and they sort of intertwine is just so wonderful. It's amazing. The Magic Shop by H.G. Wells. A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Roxana by Daniel Defoe. Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass by Frederick Douglass. The American Isherwood by Burge and Freeman. Down There on a Visit by Christopher Isherwood. Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. I went to see this on the West End and so reread it because I love Death of a Salesman so much. The Cambridge Companion to the Literature of Berlin. The Queer Cultures of 1930s Prose. Political Inversions by Andrew Hewitt. You can tell I was spending a lot of time in the British Library doing research at this point. The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. 'Twas the Night Shift Before Christmas by Adam Kay. The Last of the Mohicans by James Fenimore Cooper, which I can't say I would recommend. And then Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Ann Jacobs. Tender is the Night by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Exquisite, beautiful, wonderful, love it. Wise Blood by Flannery O'Connor. And then finally, The Drowned World by J.G. Ballard, which I just finished yesterday. So that is the 100 books that I read in 2019. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that it perhaps gave you some recommendations for 2020 reading. Like I said before, I'm going to be doing this challenge again this year, but this time I'm going to set myself the target of 115 books. I'm excited as to what kind of literature I'll come into contact with in the next 12 months. And all of the amazing things that I'll get to read. So I would love if you could leave some recommendations. What is the best thing, or what are the best things that you read in 2019? Let me know down below. Like I said before, I document every single book that I read with ratings over on my Goodreads account, which I will leave a link to down below in my crotch. But for now, this has been my first video of 2020. Welcome to January. There will be a new video at 5 PM every single weekday in January, and in 2 days time actually I have a video going up about how to read more and how I read 100 books in a year. And yeah, just some little tips. So if I don't see you in tomorrow's video, then I will see you then. But for now, I've been Jack Edwards. Have a lovely day, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.
In case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.